The snow fell in thick, soundless flakes, cloaking Aspen in a serene winter hush. The picturesque town bustled with skiers and tourists, their laughter mingling with the crisp mountain air. Jake Carter, a seasoned firefighter from Denver, was here not to save lives but to escape the relentless pace of his job. His vacation was a rare chance to unwind, trading fire hoses for ski poles and emergency sirens for the whisper of the wind on the slopes. Aspen, Colorado, exudes an eerie charm beneath its luxurious facade. Once a silver mining town, its history lingers in shadowy whispers. The town's 4 ski peaks, Aspen Mountain, Aspen Highlands, Snowmass, and Buttermilk, draw adventurers to their icy, enigmatic slopes. Downtown's lively glow feels hollow against the looming wilderness, where the famed maroon bells stand as haunting sentinels. Whispers of strange lights and murmurs in the forest add to Aspen's unsettling allure. Beneath its beauty lies a darker mystery, enchanting yet unnervingly elusive. Jake had spent the day exploring the trails, marveling at Aspen's pristine beauty. But as night fell and the temperature plummeted, an unsettling feeling settled in his chest. He dismissed it as fatigue. That was until he overheard a group of locals in the lodge sharing a chilling tale. "The ghost skier," one of them said, voice low. "They say he haunts Dead Man's Run. People hear him screaming for help, but when they look, there's no one there." Intrigued, Jake couldn't help but eavesdrop. "A skier died there years ago," another chimed in. "A freak avalanche. Some say he's still searching for someone to save him." Jake shrugged it off as local folklore, a story spun to entertain thrill seekers. Yet the firefighter in him couldn't entirely ignore the unease creeping into his thoughts. After all, he'd learned long ago to trust his instincts. Danger didn't always announce itself. It lingered, subtle and insidious. Later that evening, as he sipped a steaming cup of coffee by the lodge's fire, his radio, an old habit he couldn't break, even on vacation, crackled to life. It was tuned to the local emergency frequency, and Jake froze as a distressed voice came through. "Unidentified skier spotted near Dead Man's Run. Possible avalanche risk. Assistance needed." Adrenaline surged through him, his vacation mindset instantly evaporating. Jake didn't hesitate. He donned his heavy jacket and grabbed his gear. It wasn't a firefighter's uniform, but he knew how to improvise. Years of training had taught him to be ready for anything, anywhere. The trail to Dead Man's Run was treacherous, even in daylight. At night, under the shroud of swirling snow, it became a maze of shadows and ice. As Jake approached the notorious slope, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie, almost human wail. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the ghostly landscape. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. "Is anyone there?" The only response was the mournful whistle of the wind. Yet as he ventured further, Jake spotted something, a figure barely visible through the storm, sprawled in the snow. Training took over, and he moved swiftly, his boots crunching through the icy crust. But as he neared, the figure vanished, leaving only a faint impression in the snow. Jake's breath hitched, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. This wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was something far more real and far more dangerous. Jake stood frozen, his breath forming wisps of mist in the frigid air. The faint impression in the snow was undeniable. Someone had been here, but where had they gone? His flashlight darted across the slope, the beam bouncing off the snow's crystalline surface. The wind carried a faint, haunting echo, like a distant scream fading into the night. The firefighter's instincts kicked in, urging him to take control of the situation. He tapped his radio, hoping to contact local rescue teams. "This is Jake Carter. I'm near Dead Man's Run. I need confirmation on that distress call. Over." Static hissed back at him. He repeated his message, but the line remained dead. Aspen's remote wilderness had a way of cutting off communication, and Jake knew he was on his own for now. Taking a steadying breath, he scanned the slope again, this time noticing a faint trail leading down into the dense trees. It was subtle, almost erased by the falling snow, but it was there. "Whoever you are, you're not alone out here," he muttered under his breath, pulling his scarf tighter around his neck. Jake began following the trail cautiously, his flashlight illuminating jagged rocks and low-hanging branches. The terrain grew steeper, and the snow became deeper with each step, tugging at his boots. Memories of avalanche drills flickered in his mind. How a single misstep could trigger tons of snow to come crashing down. He scanned the surrounding slopes, noting potential weak spots in the snowpack. The trail abruptly ended near a narrow clearing surrounded by trees weighed down with heavy snow. In the center of the clearing stood an old wooden ski lodge, its windows dark and covered in frost. The structure looked abandoned, its roof sagging under years of neglect. Yet something about it felt wrong. Jake noticed fresh snow disturbed on the steps leading to the door, as if someone or something had been there recently. As he approached the lodge, his flashlight flickered, its beam faltering. "Great," he muttered, tapping it against his palm. A sudden noise stopped him in his tracks, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from inside the lodge. It wasn't the sound of wind or creaking wood. It was deliberate. Jake reached the door, his pulse quickening. He placed a gloved hand on the handle, testing it gently. It creaked open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit interior. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and something else. Something metallic and sharp, like rusted iron. "Hello?" he called out, his voice steady but low. The tapping stopped. He stepped inside, his boots echoing on the warped wooden floor. The room was empty, save for an old fireplace filled with ash and a scattering of broken furniture. Jake's flashlight swept across the walls, and that's when he saw it. A message scrawled in soot above the fireplace. "Help me!" Jake's stomach churned. The words were smeared hastily, as if by a shaking hand. His mind raced. Was this some cruel joke? Or had someone genuinely been here, desperate and alone? Before he could process it further, the tapping started again, louder this time. It was coming from the floor beneath him. Jake crouched, running his hand across the wooden planks. One felt loose. Using a fire poker that was by the side of the fireplace, he pried it open, revealing a dark crawl space below. The air that wafted up was cold and damp, sending a chill down his spine. "Is someone down there?" he asked, shining his light into the abyss. For a moment, there was silence. Then a faint voice, barely audible, whispered back, "Help! Please!" Jake's heart pounded as he prepared to descend into the unknown. Whoever was down there needed him. But something in the air felt off, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Jake took a steadying breath as he stared into the darkness below. The whisper lingered in his ears, fragile yet urgent, cutting through the eerie silence like a blade. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a compact emergency flashlight, a firefighter's trusted companion. Its sharper beam pierced the void, revealing a narrow passageway lined with dirt and jagged rocks. "Hold on!" Jake called, his voice firm. "I'm coming down." Sliding his legs into the crawl space, Jake felt the cold immediately bite through his insulated pants. The confined space pressed against his shoulders as he maneuvered downward. Each movement sent echoes through the narrow passage, amplifying every creak and scrape. He couldn't shake the sensation that the walls were closing in, suffocatingly tight. The flashlight beam bounced ahead, catching glimpses of the space below. A few feet down, the passage opened into a larger chamber. As Jake lowered himself, his boots landed on damp ground. The air was musty, thick with decay. He turned slowly, his flashlight revealing discarded ski gear. Boots, poles, and a tattered jacket hung limply on a protruding nail. "Hello?" Jake's voice reverberated off the chamber walls. A faint shuffling sound echoed back. Jake swung the beam toward the far corner, where a figure hunched against the wall. It was a man, gaunt and trembling, his face pale as the snow above. His clothes were torn, his hands clutching his knees as if to ward off a cold that seemed deeper than the mountain's chill. Jake knelt beside him. "Hey, I've got you. You're going to be okay." The man looked up, his eyes wide and glassy. "The avalanche," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's coming again." "I couldn't save him." Jake furrowed his brow. "Who? Who couldn't you save?" The man's gaze shifted to the wall where Jake's flashlight revealed faint markings. They weren't random scratches. They were names, dozens of them, carved hastily into the stone. Jake's stomach tightened. "We have to get out of here," Jake said, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. He helped the man to his feet, draping the tattered jacket over his shoulders. As they began to move toward the passage, the earth beneath them trembled faintly. The tremor was subtle but unmistakable, a warning from the mountain. Jake quickened his pace, keeping his grip firm on the man's arm. "Stay with me," Jake urged, his voice cutting through the rising tension. The faint whisper of the mountain's unrest followed them as they ascended toward the surface, the mystery far from over. Snow battered the lodge as Jake and the man stumbled from the crawl space. The air felt sharper, charged with something oppressive. Jake assessed the stranger. Frost-bitten hands, shallow breaths, legs barely supporting him. He wrapped a thermal blanket around the man. "We need to move," Jake urged, pulling him toward the door. The man's eyes darted wildly. "You don't understand," he stammered. "The avalanche isn't just snow. It's him." Jake froze. "Who?" Before the man could answer, the lodge shuddered violently. Wooden beams groaned as if under massive pressure. Jake turned toward the door, but the man grabbed his arm. "He doesn't want us to leave. Once you see him, he marks you." Shaking free, Jake opened the door to a chaos of white. The storm was relentless, visibility near zero. He secured a rope between their wrists. "Step where I step. We're heading to the tree line." As they descended the slope, the man screamed, pointing. A figure emerged through the storm, unnaturally tall and fluid, gliding over the snow. Its hollow wail cut through the wind, reverberating in Jake's chest. "Run!" the man cried. Jake pulled him toward the trees. The snow clung to their boots like quicksand, each step an effort. The wail grew louder, closer. Jake risked a glance back. The figure was gaining, its movements impossibly fast. "Move!" Jake yelled, lungs burning from exertion. They reached the tree line just as the wailing stopped. The abrupt silence was oppressive, pressing against Jake's ears. He tightened his grip on the man. "Do you hear that?" "No," the man whispered, trembling. "It's worse when it's quiet." Jake scanned the slope. The figure was gone. Snow lay undisturbed, as though nothing had been there. The mountain's silence felt alive, watching. "We'll keep moving," Jake said, forcing confidence into his voice. They plunged deeper into the woods, the storm muffled by thick trees. But unease clung to them. Every crunch of snow sounded too loud, every shadow stretched too long. Though Jake wanted to believe they were safe, the weight of the mountain's presence followed, unseen but palpable. The man stumbled. Jake caught him, steadying his grip. "We're almost there." The forest swallowed them, the storm's howls fading. But the feeling of being watched never left. Something waited in the silence, its gaze heavy, unrelenting. The forest felt alive, each shadow and whispering gust of wind an accomplice to the looming dread. Jake tightened his grip on the man's arm, his breath misting in the frigid air. He couldn't shake the sensation that the mountain was observing their every move, silent but suffocatingly close. "We have to keep moving," Jake said, his voice low but firm. The man stumbled again, nearly collapsing. Jake caught him and scanned the surroundings. Through the trees, a faint light flickered, an orange glow that hinted at safety. "There," Jake said, pointing. "Shelter." The man hesitated, his face pale as he whispered, "He doesn't let you leave." Jake refused to give in to fear. "We'll make it, one step at a time." Each stride toward the light felt harder than the last. Snow shifted beneath their boots, the air thick with tension. As they approached the clearing, the glow resolved into a cabin, weathered but intact, smoke curling from its chimney. Jake hurried to the door, pounding on it. "Hello? We need help!" The door creaked open, revealing an older man with a stern, weathered face. "Get in now," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Jake guided the trembling man inside. The cabin was sparse but warm, a fire crackling in the hearth. The older man bolted the door and turned to Jake. "You shouldn't have been out there." "We didn't have a choice," Jake replied, his voice edged with frustration. "There's something out there. It's not human." The man nodded grimly. "You've seen him, haven't you? The Watcher." Jake frowned. "The what?" The older man sat heavily in a chair, his gaze fixed on the fire. This mountain has a soul, and it doesn't forgive. The Watcher is its enforcer, ensuring no one escapes its judgment. That's a story, Jake said sharply. It's real, the man whispered, his voice firm. Once marked, he follows you. Always. A loud crash shattered the moment. The cabin shuddered, snow tumbling from the roof. Jake grabbed his flashlight, instincts flaring. The man at the fire didn't flinch. It's too late, he said softly. The storm isn't the danger. The Watcher is. Jake moved to the window, heart pounding. Outside, the storm churned unnaturally, shapes twisting in the snow. The Watcher's hollow wail echoed again, closer now, an undeniable harbinger of the nightmare descending. Jake's pulse raced as the eerie wail of the Watcher resonated through the storm. The cabin trembled again, each vibration driving home the reality of their peril. The older man stood, his face grim. If you've seen him, there's only one way out. What way? Jake demanded, steadying the injured man at his side. The elder pointed to a weathered trapdoor near the hearth. Beneath the mountain, there's a tunnel. It's old, carved during the mining days, but it leads past the Watcher's reach. The injured man groaned. We'll never make it. We will, Jake said firmly, locking eyes with the elder. How far does it go? The elder hesitated. Far enough to test your will. He turned toward a chest near the wall, pulling out an oil lantern and a worn map. Light this, follow the marked route, and don't stop, no matter what you hear. The pounding outside intensified, the Watcher's presence pressing against the walls like a rising tide. Without hesitation, Jake handed the lantern to the elder. You coming? The man shook his head. My time with this mountain is done. Go, Jake didn't argue. He lifted the trap door, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Guiding the injured man, Jake began the descent, the elder's parting words ringing in his ears. Stay together. Don't look back. The air below was damp and cold, the walls lined with glistening ice. Jake kept the lantern ahead, the map clenched tightly in his hand. The injured man stumbled, his breathing shallow. We're almost there, Jake reassured him, though the end felt infinitely far. As they moved deeper, faint whispers began to weave through the silence. Soft, pleading voices calling Jake's name. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let fear take hold. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crouch. The voices grew louder, more insistent. Jake glanced at the injured man, whose wide eyes revealed his mounting terror. Keep going, Jake urged. Finally, the tunnel widened into a cavern where a faint glow emanated from an opening ahead. Fresh air rushed toward them, carrying the promise of freedom. Jake pushed forward, adrenaline driving him. Just as they reached the exit, the cavern quaked violently. The Watcher's wail echoed behind them, closer than ever. Jake turned, his heart hammering. A shadow loomed in the tunnel's depths, massive and inevitable. No! Jake shouted, dragging the man through the opening. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air fell silent. The Watcher's presence vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. Snowflakes danced softly in the night air, the storm finally broken. Jake collapsed to his knees, the injured man beside him. We made it, he breathed. But as he gazed at the distant peaks, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the mountain wasn't done with him. What's your theory about the Watcher? Drop a comment. Thanks for watching Brave Sparks. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more powerful and inspiring stories. Stay brave and we'll see you in the next one.